Hello, and welcome to Thought for the Week. We're continuing our series on the names of God in the Old Testament. And today we're looking at the name El Roi. This is the name, the God who sees me. The God who sees me. And the first time we see this name in the Old Testament is in Genesis 16. So we're not going to read it all here today, but feel free to go back and read some of it yourself. Just to set up what's happening in this passage in Genesis, Sarah has been waiting for a child for quite some time, and she grows impatient, as many of us do when we're waiting for anything from God, and she takes matters into her own hands. A little side note on that, I think it's easy when we're waiting on God for something to take His delays as a denial. I think we can often take the fact that we don't hear from God in the waiting as a denial of what that dream is that we have. But we see in Scripture that she does end up having a child, and that God's delay wasn't necessarily a denial of that for her. But she does what most of us do in those moments, and she takes matters into her own hands. So Sarah goes to Abram, her husband, and she goes to and says to him, Abram, why don't you go ahead and sleep with my maidservant? And her name is Hagar. And then she will probably bear a child for you, and then we will have a child. So Abram goes as a dutiful husband, and he sleeps with Hagar, and she does become pregnant. And it actually says when Hagar becomes pregnant that she begins to resent Sarah. So this is an interesting turn of events. Hagar begins to resent Sarah, and it says that she treated her mistress contemptuously. It says that she treated her harshly. So this is Hagar, the maidservant, treating her mistress harshly. And so because of that, Sarah, of course, doesn't enjoy getting dissed by Hagar. And so Sarah treats her harshly back. And it says that Sarah treated her harshly. And this word in the Hebrew is actually the same word that's used for the children of Israel when they are enslaved to Egypt and how they were treated. So this is bad, right? This is not good, the way Sarah is then treating Hagar. So Hagar flees. She flees into the desert. And her name actually means flight in Hebrew. So she follows her name and she flees into the desert. And this is where the God El Roi finds her. So we'll just pick up here in Genesis 16 in verse 9. Then the angel of the Lord found her by the spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarah. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her authority. Moreover, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants, so there'll be too many to count. And he goes on to predict things about her child. And then it says, then she called on the name of the Lord who spoke to her. And Hagar said, you are a God who sees. There's that El Roi for the first time in Scripture. For she said, I have even remained alive here after seeing him. Therefore, the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. It is between Kadesh and Bered. So here she is. A little bit of context. Here she is. She's obviously a maidservant. She's grown up in Egypt. She's never really had a concept from her time in Egypt with all the idolatry of a sense of a God who is personal. Maybe she's understood a bit of Jehovah because this seems to be the God that Abram, that her master and mistress worship. But obviously, Hagar would never have the thought that this God would appear to her. Of a different culture, of a different ethnicity, and a God that seems to be more for her master and mistress, who she's actually fleeing. And yet here she is. She's in the wilderness. She's alone. She's pregnant. She's feeling desperate. And maybe some of you are feeling that today. Maybe you're feeling lost, desperate. Maybe you're feeling unjustly treated. And perhaps it even has to do with something you were a part of. Hagar mistreated Sarah as well. She had a part in this whole situation. And yet God still finds her. We know, as Scripture says, that it was in the midst of our sin that Christ died for us. So here she is, having a bit of responsibility for the situation as well as having been unjustly treated. And she runs, and God finds her in the desert. He finds her in the wilderness. And what does she call him? She calls that well Beer Lahai Roi. The well of the living God who sees me. She saw God for the first time, and she was so inspired by this. She was so moved by this idea that God would appear to her, this maid, that she actually begins to worship him. She's praising him. Oh, the living God who sees me. And we find this miraculous thing where she begins the story wandering and hopeless. And after she sees the Lord face to face, she sees the angel of the Lord, she's worshiping. She goes from wandering to worshiping. All because she's seen this God who sees her. And as we know, he does see her. He sees her present. He sees her future. He begins to predict things about her child and about the descendants that will come. And from seeing God face to face and from understanding this character of God, that he is El Roi, that she is not alone, she's not forgotten, it actually gives her strength to go back, as the angel has asked her to, commanded her to go back to this place and to make amends and to submit to her mistress. It's an incredible thing, and it's all because she knows the eye of the Lord is on her. And of course, this isn't the only time in Scripture where we know that God sees us. This will continue to be a theme in Scripture. Psalm 32 says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. Psalm 33, behold, the eye of the Lord is upon those who fear him, upon those who hope in his mercy. The eye of the Lord is upon us. It's upon you today, it's upon me, and that can give us strength for the day, no matter what we have to face, to know that God sees us and he sees our future, that the fact that El Roi is with us can give us hope. Proverbs 5, for the ways of a man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he watches all his paths. May that be an encouragement to you today, to go from wandering to worship this God who sees us, who loves us, who holds our future in his hands, if we would but trust him. Have a great week. Bye.